people, you know what's.
Ames County and the one that's from Colonel Rogers County.
It's, I got my people.
No kidding.
You know, you get behind the scenes, you know, and they got a program. I just didn't want to get pushy, so I always pull off in the same spot every day. And they see me wait and they know that that's gonna happen. You know, so I got 2 stops where I accumulate a lot of cars. The second stop, I pull off the side before I open the door.
I'm sure.
I was trying to read it.
And they're all fairly, they're all with it. You know, I want to say.
Yeah.
And
That was funny.
support those 2 counties here. But the whole thing, I don't want to. A lot of that body was down there. Right where near where 70 intersects
Yeah.
36, which is.
Oh, what did I say?
We're at a plaque or something for Old Prairie.
Oh, yeah?
Yep, we're doing an outstanding job as far as the transportation. To get to work.
I don't even know her.
Have to be some culture where they found it.
Yeah, like,
Yeah. No,
it's just, you know, just.
I don't know her at all.
Everything.
News are all.
He wasn't happy because he had to go in early one day. He's still talking about it. So her kid got to school.
We're saying what it was.
Like 15 minutes late. The ITFL wouldn't waive it, knowing that what the circumstances was, and she was upset because of that. What's that's gonna bother you? She got school one day late.
Somebody else probably.
Either. You do it for one.
Right?
You got to do it for all.
But you know,
It's not that big a deal.
what did my? Did it get on time? Yes, it did. It's 2 weeks. You know, put it wrong, something.
It just started, it's a little bit after 1. And we have, our first item is a resolution submitted on real property public safety. And Robin Shaw, our deputy treasurer.
Everyone's finance committee as well, with the reserve fund. With the $250,000 worth set aside to help with demolition costs. It's a case in Monroe County recently that it was under down buildings and sometimes responsibility. So because we had a very good auction this year for 2018, we were going to set that up. By the county attorney. Discussion on it in finance committee, so we bring it up again here. Cheryl did provide a draft of the process. Building code enforcement would provide a description, the cost estimate for demolition.
Hey, Rod, I changed that because fire and building codes is a department that falls under public safety.
Okay.
So. It's okay.
Okay, planning. So go to the public safety committee.
Go to the last one on your.
Okay. Is the proposal consistent with the priorities, necessary cost effective? Request for their county before it to finance for approval and release funds to an appropriation account. The correct expenditure account and project determination. When the building code enforcement officer submits a voucher, the necessary bid documentation, invoice and status would be attached to the unit scanned in. If any of the appropriate demolition project funds remain, it would be returned to a reserve account. Additional funds required to complete the project. Building codes and enforcement officer will be required to bring an additional request through the process, beginning with the public safety committee. The event of an emergency for funding between committee meetings, the chairman of the public safety committee or chairman of the board of supervisors would have the authority to commit county resources in an amount not to exceed $5,000 using the criteria above. And then at the next public safety committee, the chairman of the committee would provide a review of the authorized proposal for committee members. And funding for this committee reserve will be provided by the fines and court judgments levied by building codes and the tax foreclosure auction in excess of needs and expenses.
And then what kind of costs?
Fines for.
So right now, we have fines for building codes and it's part of the regular budget.
Okay.
So the outliers that he just had, those 1 or 2 or 3 that he just had, those don't happen very often, those are like 3 years in the making. So we did set up a separate line for judgments. Typically, fines is part of their normal business budget, so I just wanted to see if that was.
Was there thinking that there'd be more fines over and above the normal?
I don't know.
I bet that.
Here's the establish a line item for fine collections.
We have fines like that all the time, and that's part of the annual budget, offsetting the levy. Just set up a special code for judgments that he was talking about, the special judgments. Which we're never gonna budget on, because
It's just.
we have no idea, but like some of these that he's got in the works are, I think, 3 years in the making. So it's not like they're, you know, we don't have a ton of them, they don't have, I mean, this is over the time I've been doing this, maybe the third time we've seen money come like in like that.
So I've been thinking about this, I don't know if anybody else has. Bottom line, if it's a safety issue with a dilapidated building, as we have in the past already, we have taken care of them and it's cost. And if we don't have the money, we pull out fund balance, and that's a big decision. My issue is setting a fund balance for this specifically. These are slippery slope where towns or villages are gonna look at it and think we can, you know, there's a fund there, and we can, you know, use it. And I don't want that as a safety net or whatever we wanna call it. I don't want that being an issue. I want them saying, we've got a fund, but it's used. It's not there. It's not there to see us down the road. Plan of their due diligence for safety. We've done that, and we can do it in the future too. And we don't need to start funding to open that door. So, you know, the lesson is that it's very.
I kind of disagree with you, Brian, on that one. I think you need the fund. That way you don't have to pull fund balance, it's sitting there. The only time we're gonna take and start tearing buildings down, Don deems a safety hazard. He deems it a safety hazard, then have to be taken care of. Period.
I think you can tighten up those guidelines too, if you.
I think there's a lot of things we can tighten up on that whole procedure.
But it's jumping off point anyway.
But to a state, right now, we have the money.
You did a really good return the.
Right. Whether 250,000.
Set it up and then, right, and make sure that this is it's just gonna be, it's gonna be an emergency situation where something's gonna fall, something's gonna hurt somebody, that type of thing.
I think there was. So if we set this fund up, $250,000 fund, and we end up using the whole fund in the first 6 months, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna turn around, and just, and if there's a safety hazard, we're gonna take care of it anyway, full for fund balance. I don't see the need to open up Pandora's box and have a fund sitting there for municipalities to look at it and say, well, you got a fund, why can't we use it? I don't like it. So that's what I'm saying.
On my way down here on Hermitage Road, I saw a building, says, no, trespassing, unsafe, condemned, the whole thing. No point, it's not gonna fall on anybody.
Right, so you're not gonna touch it.
You're not gonna touch it. And it'll be up to that independent review saying that.
Is this something we'd like to bring to the Public Safety
It should go
Committee
in.
at the next meeting to discuss and go over and have Don there also put in his 2 cents? I think that's the appropriate way to go with this, and I can take it.
Yeah, that's,
For the next one.
we have to go back through public safety.
Yeah.
anyways. I
Correct,
think what we wanted to do here was just, we would see all the supervisors.
Yeah.
So that they would be able to think about it and.
that's right,
And if they're not on public safety, they can come to the meeting.
right.
And if you could provide us a copy of those guidelines.
I think Cheryl emailed them out.
She did, but I corrected them to be
Okay.
public safety, so let me forward them. I sent it back to Cheryl, sure. But I haven't heard back from her, which is understandable. I usually have to give her a little, sometimes she depends if she's in front of the computer, right? So, let me make sure that she's good, and then I'll share, or she will share the updated version with everybody, that we all got the same.
It's pretty much you just change public
Well,
planning.
I made sure that it's a code enforcement officer, you know, those little things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I make, does Mr. Wu, Jim, do you have a comment regarding this legislation? Or maybe what the basis for it would even be? Is it necessary?
What specifically? What part of it?
This fund balance for demolition emergencies?
It's how you, it's whatever discretion you guys want to use. I mean, the last time we spoke about this, there's 2 different things, right? There's the demolition, right? Then there's also this new chargeback from the towns and villages, potentially. They work with the court case that we talked about the last meeting, that they could possibly be charging back the county. So there's 2 separate things in my head with it, okay? But there's not gonna be, and I did, as I advised, last month, I did talk to NISAC, specifically the executive director and the and council. There's not going to be legislation to change that case upcoming in January, or at least they don't anticipate that. However, there's other remedies that you can use at your disposal, vis-a-vis sales tax or other things that would lessen the blow to the county. In other words, if you get a bill for 60 grand from some municipality, that maybe they get 60 grand less in sales tax or something else. That's basically what other counties are, not sales tax, but other things, that mortgage tax or anything like that. That's basically what's going on across the state.
It's a lot. I don't know if we can change mortgage.
And it's-
It's an annual distribution.
It's. Speak to it.
Okay.
With regard to this balance, I mean, it's at your discretion, you could, whatever you want to do with it. I think that I understand where Supervisor Kell's coming from, where the money in the past, if you're gonna pay for something, you've paid for it out of the general fund. And I understand Supervisor Davis's argument that, well, if it's exclusive, then I guess my question is, can you touch it? That's more of a budgetary thing. Or if you could just move it around, then.
First I was gonna ask you, I had something I wanted to point out. So what you were just saying was other counties, so if the town of Perry or village of Perry has something that they didn't take down or they did take it down and sent us a bill, they would short pay the village of Perry for something
No,
else?
that's separate. What I was talking about was the result of the court case from the town of Arundecoit that went up to the Court of Appeals. And now the towns and villages have the opportunity to levy, whether it be lawn care maintenance or water levies, they can now levy back. They couldn't do that. Now they can with the county. That's a separate bucket from what we're talking about, the demolition of old buildings.
Right.
So you can set this up any way that you choose.
So also, Janice and I were talking earlier shouldn't that be put on when the property is foreclosed as a lien that needs to be paid along with the buying the property? And could we do that to protect the counties?
Potentially you could, but it's the exercise of who's gonna show up and actually buy it. You can put a lien on it for whatever it is, like the MK thing. Okay, you could have a lien on it for several $100,000s, but if a person buys it at auction for way less, then
Either way, it's coming out of fund balance,
potentially, yeah.
but at least there's a chance that they would get, we might get it. So if we had to tear down something, and it's in a good location, let's just say, and we sell it, say it's only assessed for 30,000, took us, our highway guys, 10,000 to take it down. We sell a lot there for 40. You know what I'm saying?
You just say.
So this is what I'm saying is how, and we've had this question before. How do you determine if we're gonna approve it or not? And still is that out there? How are we gonna determine that? Because we've always had to talk about it, saying, yeah, we're not gonna do that, we're gonna send it here. Or we're gonna do this, and we're gonna send it here, or yeah, we're gonna do it because it's gonna fall, we're gonna do it under our, we're gonna have our guys do it, instead of having a village or a town do it and send us some bill for who knows what, and wanting us to pay them back. At least I think the control is a little bit more there. But I guess the way I look at it is the money, your fund balance should be used anyway you want. If you wanted to today set up a reserve for whatever, a legal reserve, you can do that. Where's it coming from? Your fund balance. So, it's just a matter of putting it there or not putting it there. I mean, in our head, we know we've got fund balance in our fund balance that we're kind of thinking we're gonna use a little bit for this and a little bit for that. I mean, it's in our thoughts. It's in, we know it's in the fund balance and we know we have that in there for that purpose. And that's why we have the 15%, policy.
Question on that. Or a comment, I should say. Like in the case for Cast Isle, I think it would probably be good for us to at least have a plan on how we handle these buildings. And it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to put a lien on something that the county has been working on that doesn't have title to it. So that way, if it does go up for a foreclosure or if it does get sold, at least the county does get reimbursed for those costs that were put into that property.
If I could offer, I think you've got two different things working right now. You've got buildings that have been seriously decrepit for many years, if not decades. All right, so you've got that issue, which at some point in time, that's gonna be a safety issue, or they'll just fall down. The second thing is to be, what I could suggest is to be proactive through code enforcement to avoid that from ever happening. I'll give you an example. So then the house next to the Attica Elementary School, we went up to that pretty hard, which basically there's a bona fide owner. And we said, look, you gotta fix this up. He had some issues he had to clean up, and basically then we obtained a judgment from Judge Mullen, signed it for $15,000 for our back costs. He paid it, and now he's putting the money back into the house to bring it up to code. So that's a proactive way of kind of getting out ahead of it. But at the same time, you're gonna have these issues, as we all know, with buildings throughout the county that are, it's just a matter of time before you have to address it.
Well, just to get back to, as far as the committees that have them go through, it should be the policy, the guidelines, that portion should go through public safety. And as far as the fund, for the discussion should be taken under finance.
Janice, I have a question. Once we set that fund up, it is set for just that, correct? Okay.
So
what if next year we lose money on the tax? then what? So I mean, I know we got the money now, but we also have an extra $3 million in sales tax that, you know, we have money, we have money, it's not like we don't have money. And there's other lines that come in less. So, I mean, to me, I look at the budget as a whole, but that's just the way I look at it. If you want, I guess I always thought that the less restrictive the cash, the better, but if that's what you want to do and set it up, that's fine, it doesn't matter. But
And again, there's nothing that says that we can't add to it from general fund balance too.
you can do anything you want, anytime you want, because there's nothing, you know what I'm saying? So I'm always more in favor of less restrictive cash, that's always mine, but, I mean, it'd be different if it was something like, when we have other restricted funds, and they're set by law, right? I mean, they're 911, and it's specific for 911. DWI is specific for DWI. But we never get into negative, you know what I'm saying? We never not bring in enough money that's consistent every year or be consistent.
I have another question too, that just to be the devil's advocate on this. So if you set up a fund balance and then say it's an industrial property that needs to be cleaned up. So does that restrict our potential for grant funding if we have a fund set up for this? Are they gonna say, okay, you need to use this fund first before you're getting any grant money?
I don't know that, but I wouldn't think, but I don't,
Depends if it was a brownfield or.
Just curious, yep.
I would guess not.
Once we've done that through business center, which is a whole different entity than town government.
I guess
That's why I said,
my question is, say we could do it for 250,000, and in 2022, we will for 250,000. Next year, we're gonna appropriate 250,000 to fund it again, so it's gonna be a 1 year, it's gonna be a 1 year thing. I don't know.
Well, how much have we spent in the last 10 years
Exactly.
doing this?
How much have we done?
What have we done, $60,000?
Maybe.
Maybe in the last 10 years? I don't see us going through $250,000. Quite frankly, I think 250,000 is too much. I wouldn't put that much in it, I put 100,000.
I mean, we appropriate $60,000 at the blink of an eye
Like last
for
5 years.
a mental health evaluation. You know what I'm saying?
In 5 years, you don't have to reach into fund balance. Use it for something else.
I-
Don't.
Doesn't matter to me, I don't know.
So I have a question. When we talk about judgments and enforcement of those judgments, are those different than a civil judgment?
No, it's the same, so Supervisor Mays, with judgments, if we obtain one with a property, it's a civil judgment, it's good for 20 years because it's on the property owner at the time.
Right.
So if that person, and like we think that it doesn't mean anything, but a lot of times people go get a mortgage,
In
their life is in a better place and you could go back in 10 years and pay. And you get 9% interest per year, so.
so when we serve them upon those people, are they served by the sheriff's department?
Correct, yeah.
They are,
And the,
that's what I thought.
yeah. So if they have income that's taxed, then we will garnish that income pursuant to the statutes. So, yeah, I mean, it's not an exercise of futility, we'll actually get the return on that and timely walk in by done. We're talking about judgments on property. So,
I just had a question to, you know, civil judgments that are served, then they can go into an execution.
You want to explain it a little more, what your thoughts are on setting this up?
Correct.
You might want to come up front though, because nobody that's on Zoom can ever hear you.
no, the Zoom connection is terrible. You can't hear,
Can't hear you.
No,
it sounds like everybody's talking at the same time.
I know.
But it is
The rule, it's not me, I don't know.
I know that goes terrible. So, first of all, this is great that the fund is going to be set up. I mean, we tried to establish this a long time ago. This may help with some of our large scale problems where we have, you know, absentee landowners walk away from the property. We, you know, every town's got its. Every town's got its, you know, problem child in it. So, this will be a method for us to, hopefully get some of these areas taken care of. So I'm hearing some comments earlier, the conversation of how the funds would be utilized. Does that seem to be the biggest question? How we're doing this for?
Or if they're not needed.
Or not needed.
Right.
Right, so in the past, historically, so I've been doing this job 22 years. And you know, how many times have I come back to the board to ask for funding to down buildings? Not many. My track record is pretty good for that. We did 38 demolitions in 2021. $233,000 in demolition costs. Okay, the county took part in 3 of those with some consolidated efforts with highway, and those were in the building area. If you remember which ones those were. So the other demolitions were either done with, private or by other means. So very little, this fund isn't to be willy-nilly used every time there's a demolition problem. So we usually go run it down and find other methods to get these done. This would be one of the severe cases where we might need a little help with it. We have some pending properties. I'm going to use Genesee Falls as a good example down there. When I know what I'm talking about. I mean, those are some serious cases in close proximity to buildings that are occupied. Those are serious. I mean, we all have, one of these in our jurisdiction that we're going to have to take care of at some point.
I think we need to have the guidelines in the process first. And what I mentioned before was that needs to go to public safety. And then we can discuss as far as the financial part of it at the finance meeting. But I really think that we need to know, I mean, it shouldn't be just something that is mowing along.
No, right. And Jim knows, I mean, we've worked out a number of methods over the years with fixing these properties. We have come up with some really creative ideas in the past of how we're doing this. Some of these is simply, the person's willing to volunteer to actually turn the property over. Sometimes to another contractor or, someone else who's looking to buy property. We've done that method and then it gets fixed. And it eliminates our time in court and all kinds of proceedings. You got to be a little clever on how you do these things. We've come up with some good ideas in the past and have successfully pulled it off.
And I think my concern is that I want to see that continue. I don't want it to just make it easy until the money runs out.
Right.
And also, I tend to agree with Janice as far as, do we have to make it a restrictive fund? Or can we, is there another way to do that? But that we can go through finance, I think.
I guess my question is, if we have, and this is a question I posed to you in the email. If you have a fund for $250,000. And so in your head, if you were like me, you would say, oh, okay, you think of projects, budget that money and take care of that money. And then what? And then are we budgeting $250,000 every year?
No.
So we're just gonna be a 1-year thing?
Yep, we'll do that, and then we'll refund it with a percentage of what happens at the sales auction, and then a percentage of what we get off the fine money. And that'll just keep.
What percentage?
So we don't early, we won't have to hit or say that's $250 every year. We're not locked into that amount.
So that's a piece that I'm just going through. So that percentage is coming from something else. So if you say a person, I understand the judgments, like that money, we don't ever budget for, but we budget for the auction. I mean, that's, if we don't, we budget for the auction, if we get X amount, and it's usually been fairly close. So we budget for the auction, so we don't have to raise taxes. So, I mean, if we think the auction's gonna be higher, because it's been higher, we raise the budget amount. And we do that, so we don't have to raise taxes. So are we gonna raise that and then raise additional fund? In my head, it's all budget money and it's tax. So that's just where I'm going. We got 250, in my head, I'm gonna spend 250. And then how are we gonna handle the rest of it?
Yeah, we may have a year, but we never touch that one.
We have to get guidelines, studying all of that. So for everything.
Yeah, and if we have to tap into that money, I mean, we're gonna have to follow our own procedure. I have to come to meetings. I gotta tell you about the project, if it's gonna be a demolition, we're gonna hire a contractor, I have to call bids, I gotta do that whole. So it's not, you know.
Have we ever not appropriated the money to find out to take care of it?
Walking into this, I was on the side of setting up the balance. And I can understand where you're coming from on it completely. It would change my thoughts on what my interpretation was walking in here. Biggest thing to me about having this established fund is then we're not arguing back and forth of whether we should be taking, the county should be the one paying to take it down. As you well know, there's been several discussions going on. So again, the overall out of Monroe County, where it is the county that has to pay for it, and there's no legislation looking to change that, then the county's got to pay for it, and we really need to set up this extra fund that's restricting us.
So unless there's more questions now, again, it's something we were gonna touch on this, at least it was my interpretation of it. We're gonna touch on this today with all the supervisors here, and then take it up, like I said, through public safety for the guidelines and process, and through finance for the financial piece, exactly how much it would be.
Don, I have just one quick question. Are there properties that we know of, well, we do know of, but that are going to have to be taken care of this coming year that are definitely a public safety issue?
There are properties that can tackle this coming year, but may or may not need utilization of this fund at all. It just depends how we.
And I think maybe something else that might be helpful is to have a list of those that we provide for the supervisors. So that they can be prioritized and know where each one is at. That we probably have that.
I have a lengthy list.
Might be helpful.
One of the properties there in Athens, there are tracks that some of those times in discussion. As it was sold to a reputable business that owns 500 buildings on that stretch. I don't foresee that being problems with the county. Not correct. Again, I know the man. So again, that was always a fear and a topic here, right? But I suppose it depends on who buys it. Whether
It does, and that's where it comes back to sometimes some discussion with patrons of the community or other contractors or developers or whatever. Sometimes there's other means to get these things taken care of. And sometimes we talk about in court, you pay fines or sign it over. We have people who are willing to buy, maybe more support, just a little quick sale. And there's a lot of things that get done, different kinds of travel on doing. Like I said, this is a, last resort, no other choice. Here we go.
Make one last statement. Thank you. All I hear lately from us is planning. That's exactly what this one is doing. You plan for something, we may not use this money for 5 years. Or we may use it next year, but at least it's there. You don't have to sit around and talk about, hey, do we want to spend fund balance on this? We'll have another 2-hour conversation on whether to spend fund balance to tear down a place. It's just my thought on it is, it's a plan.
I'm with you, Jerry, it's like, he'll come back, and how many discussions, and how long of discussions will we have on him wanting to take down the building?
Thank you.
If you establish something like this, then he can do his job, and we don't have to have drawn out, because it's only gonna be an emergency type of thing, it's not just send, to mow somebody's lawn or clean their sidewalk, take a tree down, it's something that's, has to be done, and you don't have to keep coming back, because that's what we do.
That's a good point too, but very specific environmental things. We're not all going to be here for that.
I agree with the plan and everything, but if you put that fund out there, you're gonna get a developer. The guy who gets a property and say, hey, you got a fund to clean this up. Let me in.
No, I
That's-
think, I don't think.
That would, if the guidelines were right, would it be that way?
Look at what that Rhino Coast deal, or Monroe County deal. Rhino Coast went out. Mowed the lawn and built. Now the state's backing the Rhino Coast up. You put a fund out there, the state can back everybody up. I don't see a reason such a fund out. We're good. It's a public safety issue, it's an issue. Don't have the past. Do it again. I didn't see a Pandora box.
We'll spend hours discussing it again. Every one of us.
Anything further?
No, we'll bring it to public safety to discuss it.
Public safety and finance.
Okay.
So look for it on the agenda, and if you're not on those committees and want to participate, please come.
One.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, we wait for that. So.
Shut up, right? Get it. Push it forward. Turn back.
I don't know how many of you may have gotten phone calls in the last 1 or 2 days regarding what our surrounding counties have put out in press releases and regarding our mask mandate that came down from Governor Holbrook's office. But I asked Laura Tucci to come in and talk. We've been on several calls with the surrounding 11 counties and the Department of Health and various things. So I asked her to come in and talk to see, I would like to see this, I would like to put out a statement at the end of the day today. And I just want to get the feel of all the supervisors rather than just do it. I want to have your input first. Before.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Steve. I do feel like I need some new material to bring before this board. So here we are. Last Friday, Governor Hochul dropped a press release. We did not have any advance notice of it coming. And the release in summary indicates that effective yesterday and until January 15th, that mask use is required indoors in public places in New York State. Now, businesses do have the option of requiring proof of vaccination in lieu of requiring masks, but the FAQs we've seen since then indicate it can be a hybrid. So these last 18 months have taught me nothing more than to want to make a plan, right? And so we did decide collectively, we met late in the day internally in the health department on Friday. And my gut said, take a breath, let's hold on this and see what comes. Because this time last year, this board adopted a complaint procedure. There was 3 steps. I brought a copy if y'all would like to look at it and send it around. The short story of the process was step 1 is education. Step 2 is written notice. And then step 3, we go to a stipulation fine. And the system that was set up last year to deal with that was people who were making complaints about mask use were instructed to call the number at New York State complaint line
And sometimes that deterred people from taking that step because it was another step. Make the complaint either on phone or online, and then the state pushed it down to the county who was responsible. That created a tracking mechanism, and I rather wish Don hadn't stepped out because he was part of the solution last year. Essentially permitted establishments like restaurants that had complaints were funneled to the health department, and Robert's office did a great lot of the legwork associated with the rest of the investigations. So here we are again. Except this time, this moment, the health department is involved in higher case numbers than we've seen since January of last year, earlier this year. Vaccination, which is continuing, ongoing, and moving a little around every day. And also testing, because we are listening closely to the hospital, dealing with high volume in the emergency room, dealing with staffing difficulties based on the vaccine mandate. And we're trying everything that we can to make sure that testing, there's no barriers to testing, right? We don't want to bill anybody's insurance. We want to provide it because you know what we're seeing is in the period of time since maybe September 1st to probably the 1st of this month, we had about 1,600 cases reported, new cases. About 23% of those were among people who had at least one vaccine. Most of those illnesses were mild, not requiring hospitalization. There was a single day last week where 88% of the people in our hospital were unvaccinated. Okay, so there's that rate. We want people to understand what their status is, because I'll tell you what, I feel great, but I think I might have been exposed to someone who's positive. I'm gonna go get a test because I don't want to make anyone else sick. Everybody can do what they please. I am in charge of me. So Chairwoman Ryan referenced some phone calls. Wow, I am not on anybody's Christmas card list this year. It is what it is. So, you know, the health department is nimble and we like to come forward with solutions, but we also have a lot of conversation that's occurring in the region, and I thought it was best to bring it to this board. Well, I spoke with Chairwoman Ryan first, but bring us to this board for some discussion on what would you like to do. One thing that I was preparing some notes for this meeting, and I got hung up on one statistic, and I'm not being overly dramatic, I'm just trying to be my new phone sensitive self. Is there are 71 families in this county that are heading into the holidays without someone that they love because of COVID. And I try to keep that in mind, regardless of how tired I am of this and how tired I am of being diverted from the work of local health departments. So I'm doing it. Up to you. So would you like the copy of the procedure last year? No. What? We'll put it in the minutes. Okay.
Laura, I have one question. It was brought up at our fire meeting last night in Pavilion, which is Genesee County. However, I seem to be the person they look to for some guidance on this. We run our hall out for weddings, parties, whatever. Does that constitute our building being a public building and we should require masks?
So that falls in the fine print category. Let me pull up my guidance. I want you to get on that, Jerry, because these FAQs just came out yesterday, and it goes through and it categorizes who's required, who's exempt. Private residents, for example, are exempt.
Our resolution was, I told them that I would put signs up on the door that masks are encouraged or required, zero. But we did put in part of our contract that whoever is running our hall is responsible for enforcing any state mandates. So that the fire company themselves not be held liable. We hope they're not going to be able to be held liable or fined if somebody has a party that doesn't require maintenance.
So that seems like a fair approach, providing the right level of protection to the fire hall. Again, I would be inclined to share our commissioner's determination and reference table with you, and we can go through it together and just make sure we have all the information.
You have to sanitize the building,
Well, that was another question that was brought up. I mean, they have done it, but how well, I'm not sure. We're not hiring a special company to come in and sanitize. Service.
All it says is the cars and masks for, asking for vaccination. Now, I'm a phone viewer. I tend to agree with, like Shelley and Genesee County as far as our efforts. We do have limited resources here. And I believe, I feel that our efforts need to be focused primarily on vaccination and testing, because we've got the drive-through testing now. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I've heard from people that said, I think it's changed now, I think insurance companies will pick up the cost of the testing. Well, people would say, a lot of people don't realize it. But people would say, they're not going to be tested anymore. Close to Christmas, it was costing them $75 every time they got tested. If you got 3 or 4 kids, and you're getting tested for a day, that's a lot of money out of pocket for most of our residents here. So testing, I think, is real important. That focus on that and to go back to in the phone calls. So that maybe we can set up a system that will retrieve the phone calls and messages. And then as we've got people from our other, like the testing, the vaccinations, and the booster shots, we can go and check that. And then set it up to the state or call business.
So I don't think the state's hotline is back. I did a quick search for it, and I've not seen any mechanism for the state to become involved in the complaint process. And again, there are just not that many of us. And, you know, I'm, for those of y'all who have known me for a while, I'm a rule follower and I try to come forward with solutions. I don't.
You guys don't have time to be masked.
Well, so, you know, we have time that belongs to the county, but I would way rather be spending it on vaccination and boosters going out to the schools.
That's what we need to be focused on.
That's right.
But, oh, God, I dropped the mic. How fun. Sorry.
This is my opinion. I think your time is better spent doing those things, like you just mentioned, the vaccination, the boosters, the whatever. But of course, we want to let basically the public know that this is not done. This is still a very serious issue. Protect yourself and to, you know, broadcast that as much as possible on deaf ears, but you know, what else can you do?
So
Finding people isn't gonna help anything.
I would agree, but in the same regard, you know, Livingston County made a pretty pointed statement. And I would really, you know, not super, I mean, doing crazy. I'm supporting employing, but I would be very cautious because for as many people that are disgusted with mask use and aggravated with being told what to do, we have people who have lost money, lost loved ones, and who are at significant risk of contracting COVID. I mean, you know, there's a balance to be struck here. You know, and one of the things I like best about my own county is resilient and proud, and nobody likes to be told what to do. So what I'm urging is let's do the right thing and potentially create a mechanism to receive any complaints that we have, no mask use or no vaccination, you know, verification policy process, whatever. Receive those, contact the businesses and let them know. You know, and it may not be a visit, just you don't have capacity. Contact the businesses and let them know that there are patrons to their establishments who don't feel like the business is making safe choices. That's my suggestion, and it's not going to be real time.
I think we've got to provide a venue for that.
Yes,
Because like you, I've been wearing this
that's right.
And I'm tired of it too. But there's a reason I'm tired of it,
That's right.
because enough other people aren't in compliance with it. And I think our press release has to be worded in a manner that non-enforcement of the policy or the mandate is not at the beginning, if we choose to go that way, but at the end, because first thing I heard this morning from a group of people is, well, they're not enforcing it.
Right.
So that means this is meaningless, and I've had it. I spoke to someone, I was in Erie County, and someone was on my close proximity to me and didn't have a mask on, and I said, please step back. And their first reaction was not good, and I said, I'm sorry, please step back. And I said it in that manner. I have rights too. In addition to the people that don't want to wear it, I have rights as well.
And so that's exactly the balance that I would caution, right? So at your discretion.
Well, I think there's a whole group of people out there that want us to just go out and say to the governor, go to hell, we're not going to enforce it. And I totally disagree with that.
Okay.
We need to take in, we had a 3-step program that worked very well the last time. And I think basically where we ought to be again, but that should be our last step. Your people need to be focusing on vaccinations, testing, so on and so forth. And if we have time, you know, and basically you probably won't. So in essence, we're not going to really enforce it, but yet we're not going to say that we're not enforcing it. And that's what people are saying out there.
That is.
Who cares? They're not going to enforce it anyway. Or I'm going to go to Livingston County and do my shopping because I have to wear a mask in Wyoming County. Well, that's fine.
And I also heard someone say that, and this may or may not be true, I don't know this, but they said that a clerk in a convenience store in Silver Springs said that if you come in without a mask, they are supposed to ask to see your vaccination card. So again, we're putting someone, not we're, but collectively, society, we're putting someone in a position that he or she should not have to be in.
Right, I think it's confrontational.
Exactly.
Laura, when are the home test kits supposed to be coming out? Is it January?
So I don't know how Monroe County found 3/4 of them needed to have home tests. And about 1/4 of them are gonna have grant dollars.
Last night, yeah.
I
So
know
we,
my daughter bought one in Rite Aid in Attica, like for $20.
right.
And I heard that they were going to be covered by your private insurance. for
So
Medicaid.
says the federal government, I can't wait to see how that works. That's why I don't want to get into any kind of, test insurance for testing. We have grant dollars. We made a large purchase of rapid test kits. That's what we're deploying up at Highway. I have heard, Sue, that New York State is going to be providing 2 packs of the Binax at-home test kits to the county, but they are mostly to be deployed to the schools. If you recall, we had, entered into an agreement to keep the kiddos in school.
Right.
And that still remains our priority. Those kits that we are expecting sometime will be deployed outwards to the schools. The schools are running out of tests that we provided them early in the year with the assurances from the state that we would have a bottomless kit supply. And it's happened. So thankfully, the grant funds that we have hanging are not fully encumbered, and it's a good thing because
Also, the people that are getting COVID, I know, the vaccinated are getting it also, but are the vaccinated people ending up in the hospital?
23% of the cases since about September and December 1st, 3-month period, were breakthrough cases among people who had at least 1 dose. Now that covers a lot of ground because we've got boosters at play now too. But out of the people in the hospital, 85+% of them, including the ones in ICU, were unvaccinated. So there's that rate. Unvaccinated people, this is the Delta variant, right? More transmissible, more severe illness. The vaccine offers protection from serious illness, hospitalization, and death. There's no promise that you're not going to get COVID, but there is a greater probability that you will get it.
And may I just comment on that, that those are the people that ended up in the hospital. There's still unvaccinated people that did not end up in the hospital that had severe cases and severe side effects to getting COVID. So there's always that to remember too, that it does have other, things that might bother you down the road a little bit.
So the rest of it is that we're just starting to see the glimmer of this data coming through. People who have COVID generally have a 90-day window where their antibodies provide natural immunity. We are now seeing reinfection of those people who have had COVID once. So we're still in it. I wish we weren't.
Laura, this is Dan Lure, if I might speak up.
Please.
Okay, so the facts should speak for themselves. Within the county, we still have a very high infection rate. It's actually higher, our positivity rate's higher than many of the other counties within the state. But the other thing is that our vaccination rate is also lower than some of our surrounding counties, and in particular, downstate areas as well. So we have a lower vaccination rate. The other thing to mention is that our hospital is under stress because of the number of COVID patients who are in the hospital. And I think, to come out and overtly oppose a mask mandate by the governor would be irresponsible on our part. I think, I cringe because the counties that are doing that are putting politics above the pandemic. And it's unfortunate that they would do that because it's a proven fact that masks do help. The other thing that I saw in the news this morning was, and many of you might have seen it, is that even 2 doses of Pfizer vaccine are only 33% effective against the Omicron variant. And you really need to get a booster. So there's some discussion now about making that booster mandatory in order to bring your resistance up to the 75-80% level. So there's just too many unknowns out there at this point. And I think if we were to come out with a press release that opposes the mask mandate, I think we would be acting irresponsibly. It's just my 2 cents.
I think that we need to discuss what the priorities are, that we are working on the vaccinations, the testing, and so educating, collaborating, and communicating. And that we do have that venue set up for receiving phone calls.
And then the enforcement.
So then I'm presuming then that this procedure that was adopted by the board resolution last year will stand. You guys want to look at it? We can, whatever you like. It was pretty brief.
Yeah, sure.
I can read it quick.
Oh, wait a minute.
Let's see, response to COVID-19 compliance complaints procedure introduction. On March 7, 2020, New York State Governor Cuomo issued executive order number 202, declaring a state of disaster emergency for New York State. Subsequently, on March 18, 2020, executive order 202.6 was issued instituting measures known as New York State on pause, directing all non-central businesses to close in-person operations and ban all non-central gatherings of any size. This resulted in a New York State Pause Enforcement Assistance Task Force being created on April 1, 2020 to address complaints regarding non-compliance with Executive Order 206. Wyoming County Code Enforcement Officer has been identified as the primary recipient of complaints registered in Wyoming County. Purpose. The following guidance is being developed to assist the Wyoming County Department of Code Enforcement Health as they respond to these complaints. This will help to safeguard that complaints are addressed in a fair and consistent manner while maintaining compliance with Executive Order 202.6 and guidelines established for the reopening of New York State with the regional phased in approach that started on May 15, 2020 in our Finger Lakes region. Procedure: as complaints are received and determined to be valid, the following stepped enforcement procedure will be utilized by the responding department. Step 1, first complaint. Use this as an educational opportunity, review current guidelines pertaining to the noted facility and actions needed to be in compliance. This can be done either in person or by phone. Discussion will include the nature of the complaint, steps need for compliance, and possible enforcement actions if non-compliance continues. Notes detailing the complaint and conversation will be included in the facility complaint files. Also ensuring that a safety plan is in place and self-certification has been completed. Step 2, second complaint. Same complaint is addressed in step 1 at same location. Written notification will be sent to the noted establishment, business or facility addressing the complaint, and at a minimum include the nature of complaint, noted areas of violation, in detail noting step 1 complaint, steps needed to be in compliance as a result of the second complaint, possible enforcement actions if the establishment, business or facility remains out of compliance, i.e. fine, revocation of certificate of occupancy, revocation of operational permit. Step 3, third complaint. Same complaint is addressed in step 1 and 2 at same location. If confirmed that the establishment, business or facility is still out of compliance and not following the prescribed guidance as required, the appropriate enforcement action will be initiated as indicated in step 2, written notification. Fine, revocation of certificate of occupancy, revocation of operational permit. Appeal process to address enforcement action to include business owner given the opportunity for a hearing, business owner presented with stipulated offer to resolve case, law enforcement if needed, public notification of enforcement action. And this was approved 7/14/2020 by the planning board of supervisors resolution 2020.
There must be some changes to that.
Some of the language was very specific to that moment in time last year. What I'm really inquiring is steps 1, 2, and 3, with an understanding that our mechanism will be to establish, and we're going to go back on a recorded message of the health department. Step 1 is, press 1 to record a complaint against the facility in Wayne County. And we'll gather those. In this juncture, make phone calls. We do not have capacity to go on the road.
And just to clarify, there are no county cars parking in front of businesses to see what's going in and out.
And then listen, someone picking up lunch on the way back.
That's one phone calls they're concerned with that.
I think this time around, people are gonna be a little more religious.
Oh, I'm pretty sure.
Well, that's the point I want to make is as much as smart money is to get vaccinated, that's my personal opinion. Mandating the vaccinations or the mask mandates is wrong. I understand exactly what Supervisor Rose said. I totally agree with what she said. You get the race too. And it's a fact of, I'll say it, ignorance. Just like 20 years ago when they outlawed smoking within buildings. And somebody would stand right at the door, smoking a cigarette, and blow in your face when you walk by. No. It's wrong to mandate something. And I have an issue with upholding, leaving this in. This appointment procedure because of the facts of the people that are belligerent about it are going to stay belligerent about it. And there should be no reason that we are penalizing or fining our businesses in town, in this county. To that fact, just because they won't enforce the mandate.
The belligerent goes the other way too.
I have a question.
Belligerent goes the other way too.
You're right.
How many businesses did we end up fining the first time around?
Yeah.
Less than a handful? You know, it was minimal,
Very minimal.
A couple of periods.
you know, and I think people understand,
Church.
yeah, you know,
They got their own guidelines now.
I mean, it is so far and few between. Most people understand they want to keep their customers safe.
So, yes, but the difference is we had a pretty, like, we were making the phone calls, we had a complaint, or going out and saying, you had a complaint, let's talk through it. Here's what the current requirement, like, we were being pretty proactive last time. I'm just letting you know, we do not have the capacity to do that the same way this time.
But we are in a state of emergency here. So we can't say that, geez, yeah. I mean, that's kind of like,
So.
Brandon, come on, people, get smart here.
One of the best things in her life in the last year was that she got COVID bad enough that put her in the hospital. While she was in the hospital, having testing done, is when they found the cancer. Now she doesn't have cancer anymore.
So.
We'll talk about it, a stupid chain of events.
Well, that's kind of silly though, because she should have been going to the doctor regularly.
Nonetheless,
That's where we are.
why don't we form a letter and ask the governor to supply the manpower if they want us, if the state wants us to mandate this and control
We're gonna do it and
it,
don't.
then give us some manpower. You know,
I asked for the National Guard, they wouldn't
Get the-
it's.
Laura, do what you can do.
It's true, it's also enforcement.
I think
They don't have the manpower, they don't have the time.
I can,
No,
They are coming down.
you know, I don't disagree with masks. I'm triple vaccinated. I really don't want to wear one, but anyways, my fear is bringing all of this back like it was a year ago is not going to entice people to get their vaccination. They're gonna say, screw it, why should we? Because we gotta do what we had to do before. That's my concern.
So there are so many pieces of this.
Yeah.
Right? I hear you loud and clear, and I think I mentioned it before, nobody likes to be told what to do. But in the same regard, we are not gonna be done with this. We saw some crazy case activity 10 days after Thanksgiving, and guess what's next week? Right? We're trying to make testing as available as possible.
People are tired of it. People don't know how much longer this is gonna go on. Is it gonna go on for years? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It's tiresome. You know, you put your life on hold forever.
It's never going.
It's gonna be for years.
It's just very important how we structure the statement that we make at the end of that. It's gotta come out today, because the other counties have come out. If you saw your NICEAG email today, Livingston County, Madison County, Rensselaer County, Dutchess, and Rockland counties, as of probably first thing this morning, have only put it across the. And then I'm hearing that Genesee County said the same thing, but I have not.
Ever had someone in Genesee and make it work?
I think called evidence.
Yeah, I talked to him.
Yeah, he did make a statement, but I don't think it was an official statement.
Sure was, I don't think I brought it.
It was in the paper.
Yeah, I did not bring it. He coined the phrase, educate to cooperate, effectively saying that businesses were not going to be held accountable to using, either requiring mask use or proof of vaccination. He just said, no capacity, no time, not effective, we're not. And he stopped short of saying they were not going to do it, but that's what it sounded like to me. And people in Genesee, so I have to check if it says health department on it. Where there's a certain business in the town that I frequent, and they were defiant without their masks on in there. And it's just uncomfortable, it's unfortunate. I had mine on, continue to wear it.
But Laura, you know just as well, if you go to Wegmans in Geneseo, they require a mask.
Yep.
That's the thing, Dan, businesses, I mean, no matter if we came out and said, no, we're not gonna enforce this. businesses have a right to do it if they choose to. And I think you'll see that with the Walmarts and Tops possibly. I know Wegmans for sure, you're absolutely right with that, Dana. Because my husband was there yesterday after the statement came out from their board of supervisors and Wegmans required a mask to come into their store.
I don't think it's large employers as much as it is some of the smaller establishments in the community. So,
I guess my concern as a county, I haven't seen the other counties' letters or press releases or whatever. But to me, it's like, what about the elephant in the room? State aid and Medicaid reimbursement. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a big deal if this is just for the month. You know, in January, they relax the mandate. But if it continues, and if people continue to say we're not going to bother enforcing it, is the state going to then start saying, well, all right, you've gone on record, you've gone on record, you've gone on record.
Well, that's my concern as well, Ellen. I mean, you know, if we don't get the pandemic under control and get the rates down, that the governor is going to push some more draconian measures out onto the counties in terms of additional mandates. So
It's part of the healthcare stuff too. Going to, well, we're not going to pay for this for people that didn't get vaccinated. Well, at that point, are we going to stop having cancer treatments for people that smoke?
I think that what we need to look at is we own a hospital. And we need to encourage the mask because of the hospital situation, the staffing. That's our big point, I think, is because we own a hospital, we need to look at it as with the high numbers right now of patients and the staffing issues, we all need to be proactive. If you word it so that it's not for forcing you, encourage it, you know, don't come off being the bad guy, but just try to encourage it. Look at the hospital, you know, use our hospital that way. That makes sense.
It does, and it's put great stress on that hospital. I mean, we've all got the notices of the diversions.
right, and elective surgeries have been discontinued based on lack of bed availability. This time last year or earlier this year, when the case numbers were high, the health system was required by New York State to submit a plan to increase capacity by 50%. I just can't do that this year. There's not enough staff to have that.
Most of that.
At the same point though, on the elective surgeries, okay, is it at that point or is that at the clinic? Last year, my wife was going to go in for cataract surgery. Got to stop all elective surgeries. And the people, the doctors there said, what am I going to do with the COVID patient? I'm not helping them, I'm not respiratory, and you just shut my business down by saying no elective surgeries. It was the wrong statement.
We've known for a long time, you go in the hospital, you go to your doctor, you know, wear a mask when you go in. You know, if you visit, want to put a thing up, you know, we'd like you to wear a mask when you come in. A lot of people are going to wear the mask. All you gotta do is have a sign that says, we'd like you to wear a mask.
And
Just
I
encourage.
believe I read with Gus Younger's in his obituary, that the family respectfully requested people that were attending to wear a mask.
And he was on that.
Wear a mask when you walk in, but when you sit down at the table, you eat, you take it off.
Take it off, yeah, that's what it was before. I think bottom line is short term, for a month. Oh, and how often do we have to ask the governor for a favor? We do it quite often here. You know, especially Kathy Local, because she's kind of local. And sooner or later, you're gonna need something, you're gonna go ask her for a favor. If we go out and say, we're not gonna enforce your mandate, she probably will remember that.
And craft this simple It was always best.
Just word it very carefully.
Anyone that wants to join me later is more than welcome. But again, and I'll share it with everyone via email prior, but it's gotta go out real soon. Because the calls are coming in. I pretend to keep this. And the dates and work on it a little bit more.
Sorry, so the process, Dan, generally
Is
speaking,
that how everybody feels?
so it was adopted by board resolution with no end date, so it either has to be
Oh, it's still there.
retracted or blessing or amended.
So it's just.
It's
And we'll set up the,
Truck sitting on.
line for the voicemail.
It's already Saturday night, 7, 8 o'clock.
One or the other.
we will.
And part of the message was to maybe just take out as far as it. It's not simplifying it. The businesses that are thinking or we can't go out regularly.
Take it to break.
Trying to help educate.
Get to cooperate. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate your time. Okay, on a different note, I'm just gonna mention that we received a letter from advocacy group that found at the skilled nursing facility. And I was aware of this when my aunt was in psych nursing home, but I'm writing to you on behalf of the residents that reside in Miami County Skilled Nursing Facility. Recently, in our current healthcare environment, the residents with my guidance have formed an advocacy group. The residents have included their ombudsman in the group. The group meets monthly to discuss areas of concern for the residents. You probably aware of this?
That's the nursing home, the hospital has one as well.
And said at the last scheduled meeting, the residents of the facility expressed deep concern for their limited personal allowance of $50 on a monthly basis. All residents that have a pay source of long-term Medicaid in the facility have a net available monthly income that must be turned over to the facility in order for the state to pick up the remainder of their bill, excluding the $50 monthly personal allowance. And it goes on to talk about that. It's been in place for years. It's nothing we can change, but it's something that I believe we can pass along to Senator Galvin and our assemblyman, and perhaps look into it a little bit more and send it on to Governor Hochul's office as well. And if I would put this through a committee, just to have it come out of which committee would that be?
Finance.
Finance?
Yeah.
Okay.
We put it under the hospital.
Okay. So there's that.
Sure, we did that.
Mention the cost of living. They've been living on 50. 50 don't buy what it did.
No, that's exactly what they're saying. They're put around in the letter. And Cheryl will send me a letter, yeah, send it out to you too. And we had a visit from Senator Schumer on Sunday at the hospital. And it was a very good meeting, I thought. Brian was there as well as I and Supervisor.
I made a key meeting.
Did you make
Channel
it?
4, if you look real quick.
I just saw Kale at my TV role.
I was trying to get my electric.
You were on.
Senator Schumer did send out a letter right away to the Health and Human Services and the Secretary, and it was to take into consideration the uptick in cases in certain areas of the country, such as Western New York and the Finger Lakes. When calculating the payments to providers that will be made in the upcoming general distribution from the Provider Relief Fund. Hospitals and providers in this area, such as Wyoming County Community Hospital, are working day and night to care for patients amid intense financial pressures and need this funding in order to deal with the increase in COVID-19 cases that are crowding their hospital beds. I also asked that these funds be made swiftly. New York providers, especially those in upstate New York, cannot be made to wait for this direly needed relief. And he goes on to talk about, the money has been allocated, has been announced, I think a while back, and they just have not come up with the distribution formula. And Senator Schumer goes on to say that the formula should be looked at under today's conditions because it's changed from when it first came out, and there was more done on it in September. So I'll have Cheryl scan it and send it to each one of you, but I commend Senator Schumer for the quick turnaround in the letter and see what happens. And he made it in to the airport fine on Sunday. But Saturday would have been.
All the money came to Rockland County. Nobody mentioned that the airport got money.
Yeah, he did, yeah. Saturday would have been difficult. We'll see what comes on that. Anything else come before the board? Dan, did you want to heck be an executive session? Well, I think.
No, I emailed all the supervisors to advise you that we reached a tentative agreement on the successor collective bargaining agreement with the CSEA main unit. We did that late Friday night. We had a nice cooperative session, and we were able to make a lot of progress. The union is working through plans for ratification and communication to its members. So I've agreed not to disseminate the details of the agreement until such time as it's ratified. That's a pretty standard practice. I can tell you that it's within the confines of the outline that I shared with you in a couple of sessions. And we did some efforts to target some specific classifications that were, that we needed to do some work in to be competitive. So I think it's a good. And
as soon as it's ratified.
as soon as it's ratified, we'll be happy to tell you all about it.
Yeah, we'll adopt it. Anything else?
So Stan, obviously the members of the union knows.
The union rank and file have not been communicated to.
Well, won't they have to know before they ratify it?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
The union is in the process of putting together some, what I would call propaganda material and scheduling informational meetings. What I told the union and what we agreed to do with the union is that we wouldn't get out ahead of them. And let them communicate to their members rather than us communicate to their members, which is pretty standard.
Anything else? And we have.
So,
We have
All right.